When I received the surveillance footage, my heart sank. There they were, Kathy and that guy, standing just outside the front door. They didn't hesitate, didn't seem worried about being seen. Instead, they made out right there, brazenly, before walking inside together. Watching it, I felt a cold wave of disgust and betrayal wash over me. 20 years of trust, of building a life together, crumbled before my eyes in those few seconds of footage. I instructed the investigator to compile everything into a full report and let me know once it was ready. Seeing it in this undeniable form, something I couldn't brush off or ignore, felt like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. 20 years shattered in an instant, reduced to something so base and thoughtless. There was no coming back from this. My name is Ted. I'm 56 years old and run a small automobile garage. I was married to Kathy, 52, until everything fell apart. Right now, I don't want my family to know what's happening. It's too raw. I recently discovered that Kathy had been cheating on me. And the way I found out? Completely by accident. Kathy, who works as a nurse practitioner, told me she had an overnight shift. When I couldn't reach her, I got worried and called the hospital, only to be told she had left hours ago. That made no sense. Why would she say she had to work when she was already gone? That was the moment I knew something wasn't right. I decided to drive by her workplace, hoping to see her car, but it was nowhere in sight. That uneasy feeling in my gut grew stronger. I circled the area, searching. Still nothing. I called her again, straight to voicemail. I left a message, trying to keep my voice calm, but inside, I was spiraling. Kathy had never been the type to keep secrets, not even when we were younger, back in college. If something was wrong, she would have told me, wouldn't she? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't know what to do, only that I had to find out the truth. I went home and waited, hoping she'd call back and explain everything. But as the hours passed, the sick feeling in my stomach only grew worse. Finally, at 7 a.m., she called. Her voice was calm, apologetic. She said she'd had a busy night and couldn't get back to me sooner. She was lying. Something in her tone, her story, none of it added up. Instead of confronting her, I simply said, "It's okay. We'll talk when you get home." The investigation begins. Kathy came home around 8 a.m., looking exhausted. She launched into a detailed explanation about how a patient needed constant care through the night. I stood there, pretending to listen, but my mind was elsewhere. I watched her closely, every gesture, every word. Something was off. She showered and went to bed. I had to go to work. And since I worked for the city, I couldn't just take time off to follow her around. But I needed answers. During my lunch break, I called a few private investigators. It wasn't cheap, but these guys had good reputations. I didn't have the time to track her myself, and I needed the truth, no matter the cost. Living in Georgia, I started looking into divorce laws. A part of me didn't want to go there, but I had to be prepared. We didn't have children. Kathy had suffered 3 miscarriages over the years, losses that we grieved together. But this betrayal, this wasn't something I could move past. Still, I needed concrete proof. The private investigator assured me he could uncover the truth, but it would take time. I hesitated before making the final call, unsure if I was ready to take that step. But that night, when I came home around 5 p.m., Kathy was in the bedroom, talking to someone on the phone. Her voice was tense, almost upset. I didn't barge in. Instead, I went to the kitchen and started making dinner, my mind racing with suspicion. A few minutes later, she joined me, acting like nothing was wrong. But the distance between us was undeniable. She told me she'd been discussing personal issues with her best friend. Then she left for another shift. Later, around midnight, I called the hospital again. They told me she had left 30 minutes earlier to get something to eat. That struck me as odd. I had already made her dinner. Something didn't add up. Instead of calling her, I stayed silent. The next morning, on my drive to work, I called the investigator and gave him the go-ahead. I provided him with all the details he needed and signed the necessary paperwork. The first few nights, nothing unusual happened. Kathy's car didn't move. But then everything changed. The truth unfolds. A few nights later, I received a call from the investigator. He had footage of Kathy entering a house late at night. She acted suspicious, glancing around as if checking to see if anyone was watching. And what was even stranger, she changed her clothes in her car before going inside, switching into workout gear. She would drive about 10 minutes from the hospital to this house and enter like she had a key. She stayed for 45 minutes to an hour. When she left, no one walked her out. It was all very discreet. Then she would drive back to the hospital, change back into her scrubs, and return to work like nothing ever happened. Turns out, all of this was happening during her lunch breaks. Despite the overwhelming suspicion, I told the investigator I needed more proof, more certainty. But deep down, I already knew Kathy was cheating, and there was no coming back from this. I needed undeniable proof before confronting her. As difficult as it was, I had to be certain. The private investigator reassured me that he would keep gathering evidence. A few nights later, he called again, this time with something more incriminating. The footage showed my wife meeting a man at a well-lit diner. She walked in, kissed him at the table, and then sat down. According to the investigator, she must have taken an extended lunch break because she was gone for nearly an hour before heading back to work. But this time, something felt different. This wasn't like before, meeting him out in the open, kissing him publicly. It was bold, a clear sign that things were escalating. After their meal, they got into separate cars and drove to his house. The investigator captured them at the doorstep, locked in a passionate embrace before stepping inside together. At that moment, I knew there was no saving our marriage. I instructed the investigator to compile all the evidence and let me know when it was ready. Over the following days, I prepared myself mentally for what was to come. There would be no second chances, no reconciliation, only a clean break. I met with my attorney, laid everything out, and he immediately began the process of filing for divorce. He gave me sound legal advice, ensuring I had a solid plan in place. One thing caught me off guard: spousal support. I asked why, and he explained the significant income gap between us. My wife, a nurse practitioner, earned nearly $100,000 a year, while I made around $55,000. He advised me to pursue spousal support, and although I was hesitant at first, I eventually agreed. A few days after she was served with the divorce papers at work, she called me, her voice laced with shock and panic. "What the hell is this? Divorce papers? What's going on?" she demanded. I remained calm. "I think you know exactly what's going on." There was a long pause as the reality of the situation set in. Her voice wavered, shifting from confusion to cautious realization. "Wait, are you saying you had someone following me?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." Her panic turned to anger. "You hired a private investigator? What the hell, Ted? How could you? That's disgusting. You went behind my back like that." Unfazed, I responded coolly. "I had to. You weren't going to tell me the truth. I needed to know what was really happening." Her fury mixed with desperation. "You invaded my privacy. You think that makes you any better than me? How long have you been spying on me?" "Long enough," I said firmly. "Long enough to know you've been sneaking around, lying to my face. I've seen the videos. I know everything." Her anger faded into panic again. "Ted, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. Fix things. You don't need to do this." I shook my head. "There's nothing to fix." She pleaded, her tone softening. I was confused. I made mistakes. But we've been through so much, Ted. We can get through this too. But I wasn't interested in excuses. What about all those nights you said you were working late? The times I sat at home wondering why everything was falling apart? You knew exactly what you were doing, Kathy, and you didn't care. I never asked why she cheated. The reason didn't matter. The dead don't question their killers about why they were killed. She had murdered something inside me, my trust, my faith in our marriage. Nothing she said could change that. The aftermath. I moved out and found my own apartment. The house was hers, a gift from her father before we got married, and I had no interest in keeping it. Letting go of that place felt like a relief, like shedding something that no longer belonged to me. When the divorce hearing arrived, I pursued spousal support despite everything. It wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring I could move forward on stable ground, just like she would. Her attorney tried unsuccessfully to have the claim dismissed, but the judge ruled in my favor, $900 per month for the next 6 years. I never expected to receive anything, but now, every month, she would be reminded of the cost of her betrayal. A shocking twist. After the divorce, I never saw or heard from my ex-wife again. However, I stayed in touch with a private investigator for a while. What he uncovered in the weeks that followed shocked me. The man she had the affair with? A married police officer. Whenever she visited him, his wife was away on business. But when she finally came home and discovered the affair, rage consumed her. She shot him. He survived. She was arrested. And now, she's awaiting trial. And Kathy? Well, her affair didn't just cost her our marriage. It's costing her $900 every month for 6 years. I guess the old saying holds true. You have to pay to play. 6 years later, after the final payment was made, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I gathered all the evidence, videos, photos, messages, and compiled a list of her family, friends, and colleagues, the people she interacted with regularly. Then, in one swift move, I sent everything. The truth wasn't going to stay hidden. They all deserved to know who she really was. What do you think? Was justice served? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.